I was in high school. My birthday was in March, and they weren't allowed to take you out of the high school. So I had a physical in Chicago in March. And they asked me what branch of service I like, and I said, well, I'd like the Navy because my brother's in the Navy. So they stamped all my papers, Navy. So you had to be out 3 months. If you were out 3 months without being inducted, they had to give you another physical. So we went back into Chicago for another physical, passed the physical, and they said, Army. And I said, no. I said, you signed me up for Navy. And he said, sorry, we don't need you, Army. So I was in the Army. So we passed the physical, but they took our urine samples, and mine and another fellow's was held over. They didn't get it back from the lab in time, so all the people and all the men that I went in from Sterling, Illinois to Chicago were a day ahead of me. So I lost all of my comrades by 1 day. So they sent us down to Little Rock, Arkansas, Camp Joseph T. Robinson, and we spent about 14 weeks there. And then the Battle of the Bulge broke out, so they took us away from our camp and sent us home for 10 days. So they took us down to the railhead and loaded the troops onto the military train for Chicago, but it was full up. So they took the rest of us and put us on a passenger train. So we rode in comfort all the way from Little Rock, Arkansas to St. Louis. So we got there in about the dead of the night and disembarked from the Chicago train, or from the train, and we asked one of the deckhands there where the next train was for Chicago, and he says it's leaving right there. And lucky was have it, the baggage car door were open, so we threw our bags into the train, climbed aboard, and we slept on the floor of the baggage car to Chicago.
So from
So then
Prince to Pauper in about 10
yes,
minutes.
just about. So then we got home for 10 days, and I had a brother in the Navy, and he had got a little bit of trouble with the shore patrol and was up to Great Lakes Brig. So my mother and dad and I went up there and saw him, and after that we went back to Chicago, and mother and dad went west to their home, and I went east to Europe.
Now, as for joining the 12th Armored Division, you said the Battle of the Bulge had broken out.
Yes.
When did you get assigned to the 12th?
In February of '45.
Right after Herlisheim.
Right after Herlisheim. They had lost so many good people in Herlisheim. And I think the outfit that we joined was probably 3/4 or better destroyed. So there were quite a few of us that joined at that time.
Okay, taking back a step, tell me about your trip across the Atlantic. Did you go by ship?
We went up to Joyce Kilmer in New Jersey, Camp Joyce Kilmer in New Jersey. And they handed us a rifle full of cosmoline. And they said, clean these rifles. So we spent all night cleaning the darn rifles. And they said, we're going down to New York City and embark to Europe. So we cleaned our rifles. We packed our gear. And I ended up, I couldn't get all the gear in my bag. So I put on a second set of long underwear, my full coat, overcoat and jacket. They put us on the Queen Elizabeth, and about 4 decks below, hotter than the hubs of holy heck. We sweat there. And I think we had 4 or 5 bunks high stuck down in that hold. But I think it only took us 6 days to cross, because we left New York and went south, got into the Gulf Stream, and the ship was so fast that the German U-boats couldn't catch us, so we went unescorted. And we went around Ireland and landed at Glencoe, Scotland, just outside of Glasgow. Boarded a train and went to English Channel.
In their troop ships across, or?
Yes, we had a troop ship across that we landed at Le Havre.
Okay, now 66 Armored Infantry Battalion. What was your combat duty?
At the first, I was just a regular rifleman, PFC. And then as things progressed and wounded was happening to the other ones, where we advanced to a sergeant and staff sergeant.
Can you tell me about your first combat experience?
It was scary. I remember one time they had foxholes. The Germans had dug foxholes along the road, and the Germans were chased out. And I dove into this one foxhole, and the bullets were snapping over our heads, and fear comes pretty easy at that time. And our sergeant at that time combined, he says, let's go. I says, I'm not going any farther. You go, but I'm not going. And he took off, and I thought to myself, if he can go, I can go. So I got up and ran with him. So that was my first combat.
Now, you said you joined after the Battle of Herlichon.
Yes.
Did you participate in the Colmar Pocket?
Yes, we did.
Tell me a little bit.
Oh, there's not much to tell there. We chased quite a few of the Germans out. We lost our squad leader, and they sent somebody, a desk sergeant, up from Italy. Didn't know beans about combat or anything. And we were living in a house, and we had a machine gun, water-cooled 30 caliber machine gun on a porch overlooking a railroad yard. And they sent some shells in, and shrapnel blew a hole into the water tank. So this kook wrapped it with white tape to hold the water in. And it wasn't but 2 or 3 rounds later they took the porch off of the house. So that was the first encounter at Colmar.
Okay. Stepping a little forward, the race to the Rhine, were you active? Were you involved with that?
We were in the 7th Army under de Gaulle, and Patton needed a armored division other than what he had. So he took all of our ID off of our vehicles, and we became the mystery division. And we served under Patton, and we went 100 miles in just a few days, just tremendously, no stopping at night. And it was just small villages that we had to clear. And there was a little village by the name of Hetstadt. And our 2nd platoon took the town. The Germans counterattacked and took it away from them. And they captured quite a few of the 12th. So they sent us in to take the town the next day. And that was the time when we were laying out in the fields ready to attack the town when somebody shot my helmet off. And I was laying on the ground kicking my feet with fear, and a staff sergeant of ours come over and he says, where are you hit? I says, I'm not hit. He says, well then let's get the hell out of here. So we scrambled and got in behind a tank and advanced and took the town.
Okay, now for most of the advance towards the Rhine, were you foot soldiering or were you in a track?
We were in half tracks, which was thankful to me because I didn't have to walk across the Rhine. And everything you owned you sat on inside of the tank or inside of the half track.
And now here's something that I get a lot of questions about here with kids coming to the museum. They want to know about that kind of experience, that daily experience, and everything literally right under your feet or on your back. Tell me a little bit about bathing, shaving, food. How did your life progress?
We very seldom shaved. Didn't have time, and there was no need to. You weren't trying to impress anyone. The food, you ate what the Army gave you unless you could scavenge eggs or potatoes or something like that, onions. Every time we go into a house, that would be the first thing we look for is foodstuffs. And I remember one time I was scrounging through a house, and I came upon a can of evaporated milk. And then there was some little biscuits. And another thing, we found some strawberries, so we had strawberry shortcake. Most of the time, though, we cooked in our helmets, and a lot of times you'd get about half cooked over the fire, move out. So then you had to dismantle everything and move out. You might go 500 yards, you might go 5 feet. You never knew how far. Yeah.
Okay. Were you involved or active in the liberation of Landsberg? Or
No, I was not.
Okay. Now, towards the end of the war, where were you? Do you remember where you were when you got the word that Germany had surrendered?
I think we were somewhere near Aalen. There's a little town by the name of Aalen, and there's a little town by the name of Ellwangen, and I think we were out there.
Okay. When the fighting ended, what duties were you assigned to? How did life change?
Well, really, we knew that the war ended was coming, and it just kind of eased out of the war for us. And we didn't have much to do. They were just standing around waiting for orders to. A lot of the people were going to head for Japan. And we were fortunate enough that when our division left, we thought they were going to go to Japan, but we didn't have enough points, or I didn't have enough points to leave with the 12th, so they sent me to the 2nd Armored Division. So when the 2nd Armored disbanded, still didn't have enough points, so they sent me to the 1st Armored. And I still didn't have enough points, so they sent me to the Constabulary, which was a kind of a showcase outfit with gold scarves, white gloves, really a show outfit. Yeah.
Okay, now how and where were you discharged from the Army?
I was involved with a girl, and I really cared enough for her to want to bring her home to marry. And she followed me clear up to Bremerhaven, where our ship was to come home. And I left her there. But other than that, we didn't do a whole lot. Little constabulary work, but one incident, I was a staff sergeant assigned to guard a general's airplane. And we had two groups. One sergeant had one group and I another. So they would go to the airport of their own volition. We didn't even have to take them down. They knew what they had to do. So we just stayed in this house. And things got pretty lax, and one of the groups got wind up pretty deep and started shooting up the airplane. So we lost that job darn quick.
Wow. Okay, now tell me about some of the people who stand out in your memory. From basic training through the war, buddies you still keep in contact with, any of that?
Well, I never saw any of the men that I trained with in Little Rock, Arkansas after we were sent away. And got overseas, and I met quite a few of good Joes. But I really became involved with a half-track driver from the 2nd Squad by the name of Keith Kettlewell, which lived in Berlin, Wisconsin. And then our half-track driver, Harold Goodwin, was killed. So a John Federlin from Moscow, Iowa, took over his job. So when I got married, I told my wife, I says, I've got friends in Berlin and Moscow. And she says, no way you've got friends there. I says, I do too. Wisconsin and Iowa. And she agreed with me then. So anyway, I left this girl back in Europe, and we boarded the Pittston Victory. And we left Bremerhaven, come down through the North Sea out into the Atlantic, and we landed in New York City. And from there, they sent us back to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and I was discharged from there. But they sent us home because they didn't have time to discharge us, to work our papers. So a lot of the fellows took all of their gear home with them and kept it. And of course, being a stumble bum that I was, I left all of mine there. And when I come back, why, it was all gone. So I didn't have anything left when I come home from the military.
Wow. Did you have any interactions with the British, or the French, or the German populace, the civilians?
I did with the civilians. With this girl that I met would do our laundry. And I would give her the soap that I would get, and she would kind of divide that between my laundry and her own. And I really know her family real well. Matter of fact, I stayed there several nights because I was going to school in Aalen, and it wasn't just a short distance to this little town of Rosenberg. So I met that family and I became well acquainted. But other than that, I had no real connections with any French families or English, because we didn't spend any time in England at all. Mm-hmm.
Now, one question, to be anything else to talk about, you related a little bit to me earlier about your duties when General Patton was killed.
Yes. I was transferred to the 2nd Armored after the 12th left, and I had no enough points to come to the States. So the 2nd Armored Division, a group of us, were assigned to General Patton's memorial service in Heidelberg. And we got up, I think, about 5 in the morning, boarded the trucks. And this was in December, so it was cold. So we had all our winter gear with us. And we arrived to Heidelberg, to this little church just outside of town, which was on a boulevard lined with trees on both sides of the street. And as we waited for the half-track with the body coming up the road. An officer come by while we were staying at attention, and he says, "I do not like the troops standing there in their overcoats, so please take them off," which we did. So then we were standing there, so what should we do with them, sir? Fold them up and place them on the ground behind you. Come back to attention. So we did. Now, I don't remember whether it was the same officer or another one come by, and he says, "That won't do. I do not like it on the ground. Take them and stand them behind, or lay them behind the trees." So we laid them behind the trees. Again, same officer or another came by. "I do not like those on behind the trees. Put them in the trucks." So we put them in the trucks. Went back to standing attention. As the coffin came up the road, they halted. The pallbearers picked up the coffin and headed to the front door of the church. They tried to get through the door, but with the coffin and two sides covered by pallbearers, it was too narrow to go through. So they said, "We have to take it around to the side of the church," which had a double door. So I and another fellow were assigned to go around the church and open up the doors, hold them open while they took the casket in. We stood at attention while the service was held, opened the doors when he come back out, and they placed him on the half-track and took him down to the railhead. They had the 21-gun salute there, and we had to stand in attention all this while. And after that was over, they were sent back to their billets.
Now, another question about Pat. You hear fiercely divided opinion on him. You hear some who loved him and some who hated him.
Yes.
You spent time under him. Give me your opinion.
Well, we really didn't have a whole lot of visual contact with him, but we knew that he was in charge of us, the way he drove us. He drove helter-skelter, and it's just as hard as he could go. And I respect him for that, except that he lost some lives, which was war. It couldn't be helped. But I do think that he did the right thing by driving as hard as he did. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Or
No, I don't believe so. There's.
Thank you so much for giving us
You're
this
sure welcome.
opportunity.
Sure welcome.
Because these stories are, again, what we can record and pass
Mhm.
on for future generations.
Mhm.
And I thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to have one small addition to the interview here. Go ahead, sir.
On one occasion, it was nightfall. We had been traveling night and day without too much rest, and I was in charge of the half-track, and my driver, John Fetterman, beside me fell asleep. Plus, 10 men in the back end of the half-track were asleep, and I was supposed to be standing guard and watching the front end of the convoy. When they pulled out, I was to notify the driver to proceed with them. Well, I fell asleep standing up, and when I woke, the front end of the column was gone. And I thought, what should I do now? So I nudged the driver and said, "John, they're leaving." So he woke up, and where are they? He said, "Up the road." So we did catch up with them without any event happening. It was scary at the time.
No lonelier place on the earth.
Yeah.
Wow.
Tell them about the egg story, Dad.
The who?
Eggs.
Eggs?
Finding the egg.
Oh, shit. I don't think you want to tell all of that. We were scrounging for food, and we went into this house and went down through the basement, and this fellow had an enormous amount of fresh eggs, and they stored them in big crocks with salt water for preservation. So I said, well, I'll come back and get some eggs later. So I went back, went into the basement, not knowing it, the man was in the house. And I filled up my shirt all the way around, back and front and both sides, full of eggs. And about that time, I heard the cellar door locking. I looked up. The window was way too small for me to go through it, especially with a shirt full of eggs. So I rapped on the door. He came to the door. He looked at my shirt and he says, "Stealing my iron?" I said, "No, sir, not." I walked past him, full of eggs. Yeah. That's it.